What's up, Matty Ice?
Hey guys, I'm so excited. Today of all days, I know why you wanted me on the show. I know you guys saw it, so I'm ready to dive into it.
We have
No?
no idea what Matt's talking about.
No clue.
You guys didn't see it? The new Rings of Power trailer from Comic-Con? Guys, I got thoughts on this thing, man. This is going to be an epic show, an incredible show. They show the Palantir, the Balrog showing up in the final few seconds of the trailer and how significant of a character he is. That's the guy that killed the OG Gandalf, right? And he's back. The orcs look completely different. I'm so excited for this, Damien. I know you and I watch party at your place. We'll have a good time.
What language are you speaking right now?
Well,
I don't know. I have no clue what you just said at all.
Well, just educate yourself a little bit on Tolkien and the wonderful world of Tolkien, and then we'll come together. It's okay. I'll bring you along. I'll show you the Nirvana that is Middle Earth. Don't worry.
I know who Nirvana is. Kurt Cobain? Tolkien.
Yeah, I when I had the COVID that weekend, I binge watched
Spell it.
all of The Hobbit and all of the Lord of the Rings, all of them in extended.
This is a Lord of the Rings thing.
James,
Yes.
That is the most attractive thing you've ever said right there. You binge watched all The Hobbit and all the Lord of the Rings. That's called
in a
winning,
weekend,
my friend.
Yeah,
that's
just
called
on
winning.
a Saturday and Sunday.
Do you two want me to leave?
We want you to be a part of this.
You want me to leave? You guys could.
I'm really excited about the series, but I'm not into it like Matt's into it.
Oh, come on. You got to be into it at least a little bit to binge watch it. D'Lo, you'll come over and we'll watch it together, and I'll give you all the lore. I'll give you all the background. It'll be fun.
Matt George, host of the Lord of the Rings podcast.
I wish.
We just didn't know that. The Locked On Kings podcast as well. Let's bring you into some conversations we've been having throughout the day, and let's start with this one. This actually, I'll credit you for this question, because you have a podcast. I haven't had the opportunity to finish it, but you posted it about I think it was about Malik Monk and his potential to be the sixth man of the year, and that got me thinking. Malik Monk, sixth man of the year, Davion Mitchell. All right, let's formulate a question here. Who do you think will have a breakout season for the Kings this year? And I'll give you the poll result that the poll that I put on the page was on YouTube was Davion, Kevin Huerter, Malik Monk, and Domantas Sabonis. I didn't include De'Aaron Fox. I just included those four. If you have another player you want to throw in there, but I'd be curious who you think that could be.
So my instant reaction, honestly, is the guy that you didn't include, De'Aaron. And I know you and James were discussing initially, and it's just because De'Aaron's going to take you as far as you're possibly going to go. And if he breaks out, the big thing for me is I think De'Aaron Fox finally has a legitimate chance to be the leader and leading scorer on a winning basketball team. Now, I don't know if they're going to be able to accomplish that, but that's what they're setting themselves up as. And if De'Aaron can get there, then in my opinion, he's an all-star in the Western Conference if the team is winning and he's putting up the numbers that we expect him to put up. But out of that list of guys, I want to say Davion Mitchell because of what we saw at the end of last season, but my conversation on yesterday's podcast, which is the one about Malik Monk winning Rookie of the Year, I had Andy Kamenetsky, who's a journalist who covers the Los Angeles Lakers. He's the host of the Locked On Lakers podcast, and we discussed Malik's ability off the bench, and Andy believes that that's where Malik would be best served for the Sacramento Kings, is a bench role where he can come in and just be a immediate instant offense scorer and a guy who can fill it up, and that would be his primary option. And we know that offense and points scored and those kind of numbers are usually the nod that you get when you're talking about Rookie of the Year or when you're gaining attention. It's because you're an offensive spark plug. So I think Malik Monk, if he did come off the bench, could have a really good chance at being a leading scorer on the Kings team, maybe top 4 in offense, just because that's his primary role with that second unit.
If Malik Monk was better suited as a six man and started for the Los Angeles Lakers last year at the shooting guard spot for a good portion of the season, how bad does that tell you that the Lakers were?
Pretty significantly bad. But one of the things we discussed too was I think Malik benefited, and I asked Andy about how good Malik was of taking advantage of the players that were around him, right? When you're playing with LeBron James, who draws so much attention, playing with Anthony Davis, kinda, who draws so much attention, Russell Westbrook, who draws so much attention, you should be getting open looks. You should be having one of your best years of your career, which Malik Monk had by a long shot last year. And I think about, okay, if he's playing alongside De'Aaron Fox, who draws so much attention, Sabonis, who draws so much attention, heck, maybe even Keegan Murray, who draws so much attention, how can he benefit from that? So, yeah, you're right. The Lakers were in desperate need of shooting to where Malik Monk absolutely needed to be a starter on that team basically last year. But in the Sacramento Kings situation, the Kings do need Malik Monk shooting, but I think Brown has the luxury of asking himself, do I want that shooting right out of the gate, or do I want that shooting with the second unit? And then the real question is that shooting going to be required to close the game with the closing lineup? Because figuring out a closing lineup for this Kings team, I think, is going to be the most difficult task that Mike Brown has this offseason in addition to defense.
I want to ask a follow-up really quick on that. I mean, I'm under the opinion that Kevin Huerter is a starter, Malik Monk is coming off the bench. Is that where you're at too?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident in that, and a lot of it has to do with I just know a little bit more about Kevin Huerter defensively, and I know I've seen Kevin Huerter be more consistently versatile. James, you were talking earlier about how Kevin scores in the flow of the offense. That's a big benefit to, I think, why Keegan Murray should start as well. I think Kevin could have a lot of success both as a starter and off the bench, but Kevin comes in right away. I think plays a little bit better defense than Malik Monk does, and can just fit with Fox and fit with Sabonis. I don't know if that means that he's going to be on the floor towards the end. I don't know if that means he's going to score as much as Malik Monk might. Their minutes might be close to even with Monk coming off the bench. But if it were me right now and I was making my starting five, Kevin Huerter would be my starting two.
And are you as confident as James is, Matt, that Mike Brown won't have any issue integrating Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter in a way that they're both really happy with what they can contribute to this team?
Yeah, because they're shooting. I mean, because shooting is such a primary skill in the modern NBA, I don't think that's an issue whatsoever. Now, if we were talking about two bigs that were almost like a Rashawn Holmes and Domantas Sabonis, right? Two bigs who do most of their scoring inside of the three-point line. Incorporating the two of them or figuring out how to work the two of them in together, that might be a little more difficult. But one's an all-star and one's not, so maybe it's not as difficult as we would like to make it out to be. For players like Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter, who you could argue either one over the other as a starter, their primary skills are something this team desperately needs. So no matter what, no matter where they are in the rotation, even on the floor together at times, I could see in small lineups, I think the Kings are going to find a way to utilize both of them, especially Mike Brown, who knows what the hell he's doing. And coming from the Golden State Warriors, and I think they like to shoot a little bit over there. So,
yeah, Matt, when you look at I guess we got the starting line. If it goes as according to what you and I both feel, like it's going to be Fox and Huerter, and then you come off the bench with Davion, Malik Monk, do you think we're going to see a ton of 3-guard sets? Because it kind of feels that way. I mean, Huerter is like a 2-3, but I'd also like Terrence Davis getting in there. And just what do you think the potential of that group is? Because it seems like it could be a lot of fun if you're just reckless abandon with Davion, with Malik Monk, with, again, Terrence Davis just going wild.
I do think it's likely just because of the lack of overall wing depth on this team, even with Keegan Murray and I mean, I don't know how much they look at like Keon Ellis as possible wing depth or not. I don't know. I think that is likely to have a lot of guards in there. I do question defensively how that looks. And I think that's going to be Mike Brown's main task, is to find a way to make this team of overall poor to below average individual defenders to find a way just to be a competent team defense. So if they can execute that, then yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see a lot of guard lineups. May have to do that out of necessity, but I'm hoping one of Harrison Barnes or Keegan Murray is on the floor at all times.
Okay. That's is that for defensive purposes or is that for length purposes?
It's for length purposes, really, and defense. I mean, I think instantly Keegan Murray is one of the better defenders on this Kings team, and that's more of an indication of how bad the Kings are defensively than it is how good Keegan Murray is defensively. And Harrison Barnes, I know he wasn't good defensively last year, but Harrison Barnes should be one of the best defenders on this team. Like that should just be the expectation. So, I mean, one of the two of them for length purposes, for defense purposes, and I think they're plug-and-play players. Both of those guys can play with most lineups and know how to be efficient, know how to be involved offensively, which to me is valuable.
We've had a bunch of discussions with our friend Sean Cunningham over. We had him on here. I think it was Monday, and then again on the Kings Beat podcast where we talked about the potential for Rashawn Holmes and Domantas Sabonis to start next to each other. I mean, if Sabonis can hit 35+% from three, I think it could work. But just where is your head at with that? And does the fact that Mike Brown dealt with, the Draymond Green, Kevon Looney starting front court for a large portion of last season in Golden State, does that kind of change maybe how you would view that? Because on paper, it seems like it would be difficult because of the lack of shooting. But again, he's found success with things like that before.
Yeah, I know for sure that Mike Brown is a big fan of Rashawn Holmes, and I think that was made very clear to us too with Rashawn showing up, one of the players to show up to Mike Brown's introductory press conference. My overall thought process is if Rashawn Holmes is your backup big, is your rotation big man, you're in pretty good shape. I think Rashawn Holmes is a really, really solid benefit off the bench. I don't think there should be much conversation or much consideration to have him start, which I know isn't necessarily the conversation here, but are there times that maybe you can have Rashawn and Sabonis work together? Sure. I feel like that would be more of a play of where you're trying to match what another team is doing and less trying to do what you want to do. I just don't know how that works necessarily unless you're facing a team that has so much size and is killing you on the glass and you just need to relieve some of that a little bit. Mike Brown's obviously significantly smarter than I am, so maybe he can find a way to work the two of them together. I don't think it makes much sense to have them together unless it's just spot minutes every now and then.
You were once known, Matt George, for being super optimistic. Are you optimistic about this squad?
Absolutely, and I'm trying so hard to be
You
careful
got the
because
jersey out? You gonna put it on?
ooh, the jersey is getting dry cleaned. It's being ironed. Oh man, it's gonna be pristine this year, and it's gonna go next to the Keegan Murray jersey that I get whenever I have the chance to get to the team store. But in all seriousness, like last year, I bought in way too heavily to what the hell ever that roster was, and it ended up being one of my least favorite Kings years of all time. And I put together a 3-minute compilation of sounding like an idiot with all the things I said to hype that team up. I'm hoping I don't have to put together a compilation like that again this year. But in reality, I look at this roster and you even have people, national conversations happening on Twitter between fans of other teams, not just national writers and NBA personalities, but other fans who have seen the ESPN graphics of the Kings' potential lineup and going, oh, wow, like this is actually a pretty good roster. Like I think this is the best roster certainly De'Aaron Fox has ever played with, and that has to play a factor because Fox, we know, has to be really, really good this year from the very beginning. And, I mean, putting it up against other rosters since the last time the Kings made the playoffs in 2006, I think it's probably the most understandable offense that the Sacramento Kings have had in the sense that you have your two primary stars who you know don't shoot particularly well, aren't necessarily known for their shooting, and you've surrounded them with players that theoretically and on paper benefit them or help them or fit with them. Monty McNair is doing something that makes sense to the majority of basketball players, or rather I should say basketball fans, and that is not necessarily something the Kings have done too much over the last decade and some change.
You said that this is the most talented roster that Fox has played with. I don't disagree with that, but I guess the question is Domantas Sabonis the best player he's ever played with, and by how far?
Oh yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I absolutely think so. Like I don't think it's close whatsoever. I think Sabonis opens up the game so much for De'Aaron Fox. I think in a way that different from what Tyrese Halliburton did, Domantas Sabonis takes away a lot of the playmaking of De'Aaron Fox, but Fox is still capable of being a playmaker and is still going to have to be a playmaker. But I look at his playmaking as taking how a defense reacts to him and finding his assists and his playmaking by finding the open player on the perimeter versus I feel like Domantas Sabonis, the ball is going to be running through Sabonis in the high or low post almost every single possession or close to the majority of possessions. So that's how I look at it there. But I mean, Fox has never had a big to play with that's been nearly as good as Sabonis. And I think Sabonis is now what maybe the Sacramento Kings were hoping Marvin Bagley was going to be for De'Aaron Fox, or Marvin Bagley was going to turn into. Marvin Bagley was the best chance that Fox had of having that front court partner that he's dreamed of, and now that guy is here in Domantas Sabonis.
Sabonis is the most important acquisition this team has had since, probably Chris. I mean, I'm not saying he's the best player, but like just in sheer importance, like what's at stake with this the Domantas Sabonis deal, and that you traded obviously the greatest point guard the league has ever seen in Tyrese Halliburton, who'll be the first player to go to the Hall of Fame while he's still a player. And you did that all with like, we're going to turn this thing around. We're going to use this offseason to build around Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox, and we have to make it work immediately because we have to re-sign him. And there's no protections in this. Like, there's no extend him during the season. Like, he's going to hit free agency, and we will have to have sold him enough on he's not taking meetings, he's not doing this, he's not doing that. Free agency starts, and he's signing with the Sacramento Kings.
It feels like the biggest gamble that the Kings have taken in a way since Chris Webber, because C-Web was absolutely a gamble that the Kings took, and it turned out to go about as well as, or close to as well as possible. If the Kings had won the championship, I think that would have been the ultimate accomplishment. Don't need to go into that. But Sabonis, while he maybe doesn't come in with the baggage, and I use air quotes there, that Chris Webber brought with him, Sabonis brings the contract scenario in and brings the rapidly approaching timeline. And I'm sure, even though it's still 2 years and a lot can happen in 2 seasons, I'm sure that's already pressure that Monte McNair is feeling and should be feeling. And I think the moves that he's made this offseason are an indication of we're trying to win right now so that DeMontis' decision is easy. Now, I don't think the Kings have any real chance of Sabonis signing an extension before he becomes a free agent. James, you could fill me in on this more or speak to this better probably. I think he caps out how much money that he could make if he signs an extension versus when he becomes a free agent, he has a significantly better chance to get a lot more money, which would be the route that I would take because he's already on an extremely friendly deal, I feel, for a player of his status. So I think Sabonis is going to want to get paid. I think the Kings are going to be in a position to where they're willing to pay him what he wants or close to what he wants. But also, the Kings are hoping that they'll be so good by that time that Sabonis is going, yeah, I'm returning here. Let's just figure out the dollar amount. I want to be here. And that's also kind of how I feel about, maybe that's the gamble that the Kings are willing to take with Harrison Barnes as well. It's like, okay, HB, I still believe that HB should be a King. I actually have a podcast coming out later this evening as to why I feel trading HB would be a mistake by the Kings, in my opinion, just at this point in time. Maybe the Kings are willing to gamble that by the end of this season, they'll have so much momentum, or there'll be something clearly here. Maybe this team does make the playoffs. They overachieve in some way that Harrison says, you know what, I want to stick around and still be a part of this. I'm willing to return to Sacramento and take my last big contract and stay here. I don't know if that's a smart move by the Kings, but maybe that's how they feel at this point. I think they all look at the next 2 years in that timeline and say, we're going to be what we want to be, and that's going to convince people or players to want to play for us.
You know, Matt, we've talked about this quite a bit. Like, the Kings have made some substantial moves, and I've had reservations about, like, I like every move that they've made, but every move comes with a gigantic but, or sometimes a small but. But at the end of the day, it's still there, right? And so I'm looking at this. We just talked to Kyle about this, about the 49ers and their offseason. Do you think that the Kings have done enough? Because they have done quite a bit. You know, they've added 3 major rotational pieces. They only lost one that was like a very temporary rotational piece. Do you think that they have done enough to actually turn this thing around and make you confident that, you know, at least play-in tournament, and if not, playoffs are like sitting there for them?
I think they've done enough to where they should be a shoo-in for the play-in tournament in my mind, which is crazy to talk about with a team like this who is so inconsistent at times. But for me, the Sacramento Kings, this roster, if they're not in the play-in next year, then everybody has to go. And I don't think if the Kings are in a position come the trade deadline that they're out of even the play-in conversation, or it looks like they're going to have to be near perfect to be in the play-in, at that point you're blowing everything up, and there's people probably maybe even losing their jobs. Like the Sacramento Kings, I believe right now are an absolute shoe-in for the play-in, and I hope that's in a position where they're a 7th or 8th seed and they're actually hoping a play-in game, or hosting rather a play-in game, and not playing those games on the road. The playoffs itself, have they done enough to make themselves a close to guaranteed actual legitimate playoff team? No, I don't think so necessarily, but I also question how much realistically they could have done. I mean, you could argue maybe they could have used the 4th overall pick to try and find a bigger win now name. I don't know if that trade was out there, but you drafted a rookie who looks really, really good in Keegan Murray. It looks like he's going to be an immediate impact player in Keegan Murray. And you went out and addressed one of the biggest needs on your roster with shooting. And then you brought in a coach that addressed your overall biggest need, which is defense. Like, I don't know how much more Monty realistically could have done to accomplish that goal or make the Kings a shoe-in playoff-wise, especially when their 2 best players were already here, and we knew that those 2 are going to take this Kings team as far as they can go. All that Monty could do, in my mind, was just surround them with players that optimize them.
I just want to be clear for the record. You said a shoe-in for the play-in spot. Can you tell?
Snooze, you lose.
Hey, we're doing a radio show here, pal.
We're doing a radio show.
Is that Kevin Johns?
That's Kevin John.
Hey, Mr. Graduate School, can you settle down back there?
He's in another meeting right now. He has no idea.
Oh, I'm sorry, Matt. Matt is like doing a podcast.
He's gonna narrate this. What's happening?
I love this. No, I just wanted clear for the record. Are there a shoe-in for the play-in?
I think so. I think absolutely the Kings have to make the plan with this roster. I think they're absolutely shooing for the plan.
Okay, why don't we do this? Are you good? Can you hang out? Let's take a break. That way, Kevin John can finish up his little work call over there. We'll. Of course, what a Friday, man! I swear. Well, okay, we'll step out. We'll come back. Kevin will finish his phone call. And then we'll talk more Kings basketball with Matt George. Happy birthday, Casey. Casey's in the chatty house right now, hanging out in Las Vegas. Kenny's birthday is brought to you by McQueen and the Violet Fog, the smoothest gin in the world, handcrafted in Brazil. We're back with more on ESPN 1320. We're clear.
Kevin. I love Kevin.
Oh, man. That's great. That's great stuff. Matt, you jumping in early secretly saved me. We were gonna have to break it. We went long. Everything got like super stretched, and I was gonna have to break at like 3:13. But because you came in early, it gave us a chance to stretch. So good looking out.
Hey, I'm happy to do it. Kyle's great, by the way, man. I texted Kyle. I was listening on the way in. Like, I love listening to Kyle talk football because I barely understand the ins and outs of football, and Kyle makes it so understandable. So he's phenomenal.
Kyle's really good, man. The fact that he's not on the air somewhere Monday through Friday is really a shame.
We're on break, Kevin. Now that you're off your call, do you want to say hi? Or?
I'm sorry. Actually, some of us are trying to work here.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Some of us are working here.
Like, what do you think is happening over here?
Everyone can just hang out and talk to James Ham and D-Lo all day. You know what I mean? Some of us just kind of have to do some – we're here to do a job. So
yeah.
My apologies for actually doing my job, Matt. Okay? I'll be sure not to do my job again while you're doing your podcast, all right?
Fake
Way,
angry
Friday,
Kevin.
Guys.
Fake
Friday.
angry Kevin is the best.
Kevin doesn't sleep anymore because he's got to do his grad school work. So he's up all night doing his grad school work, and now he comes to work. Matt George is pissing him off. He's trying to do his job. Matt's doing this stupid radio show in the background.
Hey, come on now. He knew. I told him ahead of time. He knew.
I love that.
Oh,
I can't even imagine Kevin being angry. Like, that's the best part.
That's as much as it gets right there.
I've seen you exclaim. You've exclaimed for my friends of the office.
And Matt is wearing an IFB for people who are asking. I am too, and I think you are too, right, Damien?
No, I actually have headphones they just tuck behind my ear. It's not an IFB.
Oh, okay.
It sucks. Like I have this IFB hookup, but it's going across my desk to my speaker over here to plug in, and it's like every 3 seconds falling out of my ear. So that's why I look like I'm doing the Secret Service talking, holding my ear thing.
Do you have molded ones yet or no?
No.
Oh, they need to mold them there for you.
I don't know if you can mold to these. Have you seen the size of these? Like, I don't know if you can.
It goes on the inside.
That's the whole point is they mold that, like they fit them for your gigantic ears. I got giant ears too. Like it's fine. Like that's
I too have big
point.
ears. Yeah.
No, haven't gotten there yet. Not in the budget.
Yeah, the molded are pretty cool. So, and I have double. I have them in both ears.
I
off
think
of
I
the
would do
same
that
button.
too. Yeah, I think I would do that too if I ever had to do TV work. I'd probably do double. I'm
can't
trying to remember
hear.
when I did CBS. I feel like it was just a one ear, but they didn't have to talk to me the same way they did everyone else.
Yeah.
I would just get the commercial cues.
There's nothing worse when they go to you on the floor for a live hit, and all of a sudden the players come out of the tunnel and they start blaring music, and you're like, oh my gosh! Like, boom, 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 boom.
I used to love G-Man is of course the greatest human being on the planet. But when G and the King, or when the Golden One Center first opened and where the radio well is, they have those massive speakers above the Jumbotron major screen. And it's like it blasts right into your face if you're up in the radio well. And G during commercial breaks, bless his heart, used to complain about the music. And he'd sometimes do it on air. And we'd all laugh back at the station because G-Man complaining is just, it's hilarious.
Portland is really bad about that. Like, you go to the arena and you are literally at speaker level where they sit the media, and they pump in so loud that you can't even hear yourself think. You can't talk to the person next to you. It's crazy. That place is loud.
I love it.
I've never been there. I've been to Portland. I've never been to a game in Portland.
Yeah. I like, there's a bunch of really cool, like, boutique hotels that you can walk down to the stadium, but at night it's sketchy because you got to go under a couple of overpasses.
Oh,
And that's not it. Yeah, it's got some rough area
Bro.
right around the arena.
those overpasses in Detroit, man, there's people under there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
like,
what it is. You're like, oh, there's
oh man, what is this? All right, hang on, guys. It's a family affair here. Casey's in the Chatty House celebrating his birthday in Las Vegas. James Ham did a wonderful job hanging out with me all day. Matt George and Kevin John kind enough to join us from the ABC 10 studios here as we're talking Kings basketball. As Matt just said, this team is a shoo-in to make the playoffs, but I'd like to get a little preview.
Whoa. Play in.
Sorry. E-me.
No, it's live, pal.
Nothing I can do about it, but it's a shoo-in for the plan. I'd like to get a little preview of the Locked On Kings podcast that you mentioned that's going to drop tonight, though. You are making the case for keeping Harrison Barnes, if I heard you correctly, and I'm kind of been in that camp for a while. You know, we've volleyed back and forth about what do you want to acquire if you trade Harrison Barnes, and we always wind up with, it'd be great to get Harrison Barnes. Like I guess we're talking a younger version, a more physical version. I know, James will tell you we don't want the version we had last year. But I'm anxious to hear, you don't have to give us the whole podcast now because we want people to download on Locked On Kings, but a synopsis of the reasons to keep Harrison Barnes.
Well, the reality is, and I know James talks about this a lot with asset management, and he's absolutely right, because I was one who was highly critical on Monty McNair allowing Bogdanovic to walk for nothing. If the contract weren't in question, then I don't think we'd be questioning this whatsoever, because in my mind, Harrison Barnes is a excellent fit for this Sacramento Kings team and does a lot that the Sacramento Kings need and don't want to have to worry about. Like, it's nice to have, with Harrison Barnes starting at your 3 spot every night. The only question mark that I had with Harrison last year, and there were plenty of question marks about his game specifically, but as a starter, the only question mark that I had was, okay, is this going to be the night that Harrison does his 20-point or close to 30-point explosion, or is this going to be a night where he scores just 7 points and only takes 4 shots? And my big thought going into this offseason was, if the Sacramento Kings can find a way to go into next season and Harrison Barnes is their 4th option on offense, they're a significantly better team. Like, I think they're in a really, really good spot with that, and here they are. Whether it's Keegan Murray or Malik Monk or Kevin Huerter or whoever they decide to throw into that starting lineup with him, I think Harrison Barnes is a shoo-in to be basically the 4th option on offense for the Kings, and that's a positive. Plus, like D'Lo, you were mentioning, I don't know what the package is out there realistically that you can get for Harrison that fills the needs and fills the holes that Harrison provides. And like I discussed in the last segment too, I don't think it's that far-fetched to believe that Harrison can re-sign with the Kings, or the Kings can do enough to make a good case to bring Harrison Barnes back. But I'm not in Harrison's camp. I don't know what kind of money they're asking for. I know this is going to be the last major contract that he probably gets in his career, and how much can the Kings compete in that? I'm not sure. But I think Monty believes that that's a risk worth taking, and so do I.
I would like to see Harrison Barnes roll the dice on him a little bit, but at the same time, like if everything's positive going into this season and you get to the All-Star break and you're in it, I just think it becomes like this big issue. Can you retain him? Can you not? Like as of right now, his preference would likely be to not come back to Sacramento. And it's not that he hates the team. It's just that at a certain point, players have enough. And I really do like put Harrison Barnes and Rudy Gay in very similar camps. Before Rudy Gay got injured his final year in Sacramento, the same vibe. He wasn't coming back. Like you were going to have to do something extraordinary for him to come back. And so you get to that point where if it's not really going to work out, and again, his defensive numbers last year were not good at all, but they felt like an outlier, not like a guy who's on the decline. And I also think that the Kings overall defensively, especially in the second half of the season, they were just a mess. Anytime you fire a coach midseason or 17 games into a season, you're going to have chaos be the name of the game. And I thought the Kings, they let go of the rope way too many times and let the season spin out of control. There's no way that was a 30-win roster at all. And they won 30 games. And so I guess at the end of the day, if Harrison Barnes is on the team and they walk into the season, I kind of want it to be we're just rolling the dice that he'll stick, that we'll be able to figure something out, whether it's in the season. Again, if you want to go negotiate a contract with Harrison Barnes right now for a 3-year, $48 million deal, that seems like it wouldn't be that bad of an idea for the Kings, because he is still a capable player. I don't think he'll be a fourth option in this season for the Kings. I think he'll still be a third option, at least early on. If someone else steps up, a Keegan Murray or a Kevin Huerter, and becomes that third option, I would be kind of surprised, I think. But having Harrison there as your third and the other guys as really close to third options, fourth options, but really not really far down on the list as far as fourth options. So I get what you're saying, Matt. But I still in the grand scheme of things, you're walking into the season with an expiring contract, and he's a great guy. He's a great teammate. He's great in the community. He's good to have around young players. But if he's not going to be there, you probably need to do it sooner rather than later.
A couple things there. I agree with you 100% that Harrison right now is probably leaning more towards leaving. I don't know why. I would be surprised if he felt differently. What have the Sacramento Kings done over the time here for him to say, you know what, I'm excited and happy and willing to come back more than I'm willing to leave, other than maybe he likes living here and he likes having his family here and he has his new baby here. All things considered, I think the Kings are aware of that as well, and they're hoping the gamble is that this team is good enough and plays well enough that Harrison doesn't necessarily forget the years before, but at least understands where this team is at now and how he can impact that team now, and how he has just as good a chance of being successful here as a starter as maybe where else he would go. I know there are playoff teams right now, and it's clear based off of every single rumor that comes up during the trade deadline season. There are playoff teams right now that would love to have Harrison Barnes on their roster, and rightfully so. I would argue that Harrison would have a significantly bigger role here in Sacramento than he would on most of those teams, even if the Kings were good. But I also, if the Kings aren't able to renegotiate a contract or negotiate a contract extension with HB right now, which I would be all for, I just don't know if you're worried about losing him for nothing, so you make a trade to get some assets for him. I don't know how you do that and not get short-term worse. And I think the idea of getting short-term worse to the Kings is not appealing when everything is about getting better right now for the sake of Fox and for the sake of trying to get Domantas Sabonis to re-sign and accomplish your goals. It just seems like even if it's proper asset management to consider trading or moving on from Harrison Barnes, how do you go against your entire plan to make that move? It just seems counterproductive to me.
I think everyone's point in this is completely valid, which is the frustrating part of the Harrison Barnes thing, because you can make cases for both. And I think we all have made cases for why he should be traded. And I think it's the midseason situation that James outlines right there that's the most concerning. And what you just said as well, like, do we get better? Because isn't this about winning games, and isn't it about winning games right now? Trista is throwing the show for a loop. She tagged us in something, and she titled it, "I want thoughts on this rant from the Chatty House." And apparently one of our betting shows on Odyssey had a discussion on the Sacramento Kings today. And the caption on this, or the tweet that goes with this video is, "You weren't expecting an epic rant crushing the Sacramento Kings today, but Nick Ashew came through while explaining his bet on the under 32.5 wins." I haven't heard it. So we're all going to hear this together for the first time, because I can't lie. I need to.
He loves the Kings.
36.5 was their total last year. They finished with 30 wins. They go out. Look, they had a little bit of an offseason, right? I mean, they got Kevin Huerter. They drafted Keegan Murray, which you like. Malik Monk decided to sign there for some strange reason. I don't know why. It wasn't even like it was a huge contract. He just wanted to disappear, and then I guess decide, hey, nobody's going to see me anymore. I can operate in the witness protection program that is Sacramento. I'm going to pen the under, because I just don't think there's any real chemistry with this team.
You're going to pen the under on this team?
Yeah. I don't like the Kings, man. I don't like this. I don't like this roster. I really do like Keegan Murray, but there's just not. They've always been NBA mediocrity. I cannot trust anything that the Sacramento Kings do. There is a decent amount of talent.
Just to be clear, you think this team has been mediocre? Really? This team has been mediocrity. Wow.
Their win total last year was 36.5, and they won 30 games. Now you go out and get Domantas Sabonis. Okay, great. But Kevin Huerter's you get some shooting. Harrison Barnes is who he is. He disappears. He's a passive player. Keegan Murray's still a rookie, but I really do think he has a bright future in the NBA. I like that pick for them. It's Mike Brown's their coach. What has Mike Brown really done consistently in the NBA? He had a couple good years in Cleveland.
Now we're going to slander Mike Brown?
I don't know Mike Brown, but honestly, he's not a coach that incites any excitement. He's a retread that goes out of Sacramento because nobody wants to play for them. Their owner at one point actually wanted them to incorporate a 4-on-5 offense or 4-on-5 defense, so somebody would cherry pick and stay on the other end of the court. I know that was a long time ago, but he's still in charge of this organization. Since Doug Christie, Mike Bibby, Chris Webber, and Vlade Divac and Peja Stojakovic were there, have the Sacramento Kings done anything? There is not a single active player in the NBA that has played against the Kings in the playoffs. And LeBron James is 38 years old, and he's never seen them. The Kings are nothing to me. So give me the under 32.5 there. They won 30 games last year. I like some of the players on their roster, but they've done nothing to show that they can ever even live up to expectations, let alone overachieve. So I'm taking the under on that, and I'm penning that thing.
That was a waste of time.
Yeah, an epic rant crushing the Sacramento Kings.
With the same talking points that we've heard for 16 years. It's so tired, man.
Come on, man. How do you Kevin Huerter's a good shooter. Yeah, no, Keegan Murray, he's a good ball player. But that didn't do it.
The only thing that I agree with,
De'Aaron Fox's name in the whole 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
Yeah, the only thing that I agree with in that entire thing was him saying you can't trust anything the Sacramento Kings do. I understand that completely, because that's how the fan base basically feels at this point. You get excited and you're cautiously optimistic, but we have to believe it when we see it. That was the best point that he made. Everything else was tired, recycled garbage, and sounds like someone who has not really paid attention. And that doesn't surprise me, because that's what I've been saying for a while, is the Sacramento Kings are going to have to earn that attention, because until then they're just going to continue to face the same criticism and recycled talking points of Vivek's 4-on-5 offense, Bibby, Christie, Weber, Peja, which the Kings honestly kind of do to themselves by continuing to keep that team around in some capacity. So it's just, I mean, okay, heard it before. Next.
Yeah. Ham, you got anything on that?
Yeah. I mean, well, I mean, if he's, I don't want to tell people to do this, but like, go take $1,000 and put it on the Kings at 32.5. I'll take the over. Like, this team will win more than 32.5. And it's going to go up. By the time we get to the regular season, the over on the Sacramento Kings is going to be 34.5 or 35.5. Almost guarantee it. They're getting a bunch of money in right now at a low over under. And then it's going to keep climbing because that's how Vegas does its odds. And I just, like, if we like wrap it all up in a bow, the Kings got better. Like, if someone is ignorant enough to not know that Mike Brown has a .616 win percentage for his career.
That's the part that I thought was the most offensive. Like, we're really going to treat Mike Brown like he's not good at his job. Like, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. It is, because he's a very good coach. He's proven to be a good coach at the NBA level. And then he just spent 6 seasons in an apprenticeship under Steve Kerr. So, I mean, how many rings? He's got, 3 rings? 5 years, right, under an apprenticeship. So he's got 3 rings from his time there. And he's got a ring in the from San Antonio years ago, right? So, I mean, this is a very accomplished coach. On top of that, you got better at most of your weaknesses. Is this going to be a good defensive team? No, it's not going to be good as of right now. Like, Mike Brown has his work cut out for him. He's got to put on like some really big boy pants and some really, really thick boots, because he's going to sludge through a bunch of muck to get to this team, just to get to the 25th best defensive team. But saying all that, like, if you're a betting guy, you know how many teams want to be bad this year, how many teams will be bad. Like, it doesn't make any sense. The Kings are going to pick up a bunch of wins just because so many teams don't even care about this season. They want to be bad, and they're playing for the first pick in the draft. So, I don't get that, and it's way too low. And I said this on the pod the other day. Like, I'm a guy who's covered this team for 12 years. In 12 years, they've surpassed a 32.5 twice. They won 33 games under George Karl, and they won 39 games under Dave Yeager. Now, they had 2 seasons under Luke Walton where they won 31 games during 72-game seasons. That equates to 35 wins. There's no way this team isn't 3 games better than it was last year. You fired your coach 17 games into the season. You made a monster trade and shook your whole roster up. Like, at the end of the day, that's irresponsible, and it reeks of, I just don't really know what I'm talking about. And that's fine. I mean, that we live in hot take world, and that's what happens in hot take world. But to not really understand like how much this team could have improved, worst case scenario happened last year and they won 30 games. That was the absolute worst case scenario. You fire your coach 17 games into the season. You have COVID issues. You make a major trade and change the whole roster. You still won 30. There's no way this team isn't 3 games better.
D'Lo, do me a favor. Find the clip of Nick talking about the Pacers over-under and listen to him talk about how great Buddy Hield is going to be for that team and how everybody wants to come and play for Tyrese Halliburton now, according to Rick Carlisle and everything, too.
Wait, is that a real thing? Is that
no? I'm just saying that's what I expect out of this, because it's the same recycled, tired talking points. So I love Tyrese Halliburton, too, but Tyreek was the gift of God to Indiana, and Domantas Sabonis suddenly is trash now that he's in San Francisco, or Sacramento, rather, so... It's just It's just the same recycled stuff, and the Kings are gonna shut it up themselves, or it's gonna continue.
I'm really fascinated at the idea, and when this process started, and I think Ham and I were in alignment at the thought. We both really liked Will Hardy. We both really, but to be very honest with everybody, I won't speak for James. I'll speak for myself. It's the idea of Will Hardy. Like, you look at what he's done in his career, you look at where he's been, who he's been around, and you go, if you were trying to build out the pedigree of a coach, it's like, hey, that's it. And then you realize Mike has essentially the same exact pedigree, but with head coaching experience. And we look down at that, and people choose to look down on it because he coached 1 year for the Lakers. And, I know Matt Barnes didn't particularly care for Mike Brown. He said Mike didn't, command the locker room the way that he needed to. Well, that's one specific locker room. That's a locker room that's coming off of their aspirations are championships and championships only. And he was given like a handful of games into the next season to figure that out. This is a guy who won 60 games, 3 years in a row coaching that Cleveland Cavaliers team. People love to say LeBron James dragged the Cleveland Cavaliers to a finals appearance against the San Antonio Spurs, but you don't acknowledge Mike Brown's part in that. Like, that is so confusing to me, how we're so quick to disrespect what Mike Brown has done in this league. We're more in love with the idea of a coach, be it, like, how could you advocate for Kenny Atkinson and not Mike Brown? Like, I guess there are just some things about this job I still fail to understand. Like, I don't get it. It's one thing when it's a blank slate for everybody. When it's Jaden Ivey versus Keegan Murray, it's a blank slate for everyone involved. But that would be like saying, do you want Keegan Murray or Ja Morant? And everyone going, I want Keegan Murray. Ja Morant hasn't won a title. Wait a minute. What? He's accomplished something. Why wouldn't you go with the guy who accomplished something? The constant disrespect for Mike Brown is, I'll hit the music. It's fine. I'll do it. It's Friday. I just don't understand it. I don't get it.
Yeah,
I think it's warranted.
It's rough to hear it. The reality is that this team has struggled for so long that, they're going to be the doormat for so many different talking points. But if you're looking at this the right way, or you're looking at it honestly, like, I loved Will Hardy. Mike Brown was a better coaching option for year one and probably year three. Now, could Will Hardy go on to be a great coach? Yeah, but it's going to take a couple of years, right? We'll get to see it in Utah, but it's going to take a couple of years. I absolutely love the idea of Jaden Ivey. I didn't love it for the Kings. I thought he was a higher end talent than Keegan Murray. If your goal is to win and to increase your win total for this season, Keegan Murray was the right choice. If you need shooters and you look around the league, Kevin Huerter on the deal that he's on for 4 years was a really good signing. Malik Monk, a really good signing. Like, this team has done good things. And to discredit, not even mention De'Aaron Fox, but discredit what Sabonis is, okay, that's fine. You know what? Like, I hope that he's personally invested in the over-under, because he'll be wrong. Like, this time around, he'll be wrong. They'll win more than 33. Book it. Book it, Damian.
Bet $1,000 of Matt George's money on it. All that Locked On Kings money on the over. I do understand the frustration in if you're a bettor, like, they were 36.5 and they missed it by 6 games. Like, what talking about? Like, they were a disaster. But I don't think that team is anything like this one. I don't think the leadership on that team from last year is anything like this one. Matt, you're the best, man. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Kevin, you're the best too, man. Thanks for holding off on all of the phone calls. That's Kevin John behind Matt George, for those that are watching there. James, tremendous job this week. Really, really appreciate you, my friend. You absolutely killed it sitting in here for 20 hours of radio. And most of all, man, people say it all of the time. They tell us this is the dead time in sports, but y'all have hung out here throughout the week, and we hope you continue to be here, man, because as good old JR used to say, business is about to pick up. We got camps. We got teams reporting to camp next week, and we'll always find Kings topics to talk about. So enjoy